For everyone in her high school, Lars is the top-scoring scholarship student who always goes by the books. To maintain this reputation, she goes to great lengths and breaks friendships so no one gets to know she is the writer of the viral fantasy blog featuring her crush, David. In a picturesque park at night, a beautiful woman dressed in white searches for her prey. She finally finds a man with a tiger mask bathing in the pond, and cannot help but stare at him with wonder. He eventually notices her and howls. The woman gets scared and starts running towards a tree. She trips and comes too close to the man, who follows her. She takes out his mask and finds a handsome face staring at her. He starts getting close to her, and she moans. She then pushes him towards the tree and starts touching him. Their lips are about to meet when they hear a knock. Lars's mom Hannah wants her to get ready for school while she finishes her fantasy blog. Lars goes to the kitchen, and Hannah starts commenting on how dry her skin is. Hannah compares Lars to her sister and asks her to take some skincare tips from her. Hannah feels like Lars should not focus on her scholarship too much and should have some fun with her friend Dilla. Lars starts getting ready for school and examines herself in the mirror before heading out. When Dilla enters the school, she is met with a lot of judgmental faces saying things about her and pushing her around. While the women don't like her, all the guys check her out, including David, who is the main character in Lars's fantasy blog. Lars can see him looking at Dilla too, and feels jealous. David is playing football and scores a goal for his team. Lars, who is a great student, meets Mizanda and asks to help with her files. Mizanda spots Sharon, Cindy and Sasa dancing in the corridor, and asks them to turn their phones off. The girls bully Lars and drop her file, since they feel she is a teacher's pet. Lars is sitting in an empty classroom when David asks her about Mr. Risky, since he has to meet him before class. Lars is very uncomfortable around David, and ends up dropping water on him. He takes off his shirt and starts wiping himself, just like she imagines in her fantasy blog. Lars tries to be rude to him instead and tells him off. Sasa is discussing Dilla's bold Instagram posts, and wonders why the school hasn't expelled her. They discuss the rumor of Dilla sleeping with Arya in the gym. Dilla overhears this and leaves, right after calling them the three little pigs. She angrily enters the men's loo, where David is drying his shirt. She enters a cubicle and asks David for toilet paper. He chivalrously slides it under the door and goes back to drying the shirt. Dilla comes out and starts washing her hands. David hears something, and realizes his classmates have clicked a photo of him shirtless with Dilla. She angrily walks out, and the guys tease David for hanging out with someone who has already slept with Arya. In class, the boys circulate the photo with everyone, and people start giggling. David and Dilla both feel uncomfortable, and Lara seems even more hurt. She decides to find solace in her fantasy blog. She starts writing about a palace where she is the undisputed queen of the land, surrounded by men who satisfy all her cravings. The queen's favorite boy toy is David, who is always ready to serve her. But a slutty slave has eyes on him, and tries to flirt with him by dropping water on him. The queen gets furious and curses the slave. Then she gives David a punishment where she tries to seduce him. She hears the bell ringing, and the class is over. Lars logs out and walks away, but the internet is slow, and it turns out that she is still logged in on the school computer. David plays guitar at the church, and Lars prays with Hannah. Lars and Hannah are serving food after the sermon when David and his father Mr. Deddy arrive. Mr. Deddy discusses David's chances at the national training camp for football, for the Kahea Cup, while David gets excited by the food and asks Lars about it. Lars is rude to him and doesn't respond properly. Hannah teases them about bickering like a couple. David tries to pay for the food, but Lars refuses to take the money. David warmly thanks her and Hannah. That night in her bed alone, Lars thinks about David and touches herself. David reaches Dilla's house with a potted rose, and apologizes for Jilling posting their picture. Dilla is not impressed, and slams the door on him. Back in his car, David is already embarrassed when he starts getting a series of texts. Lars is putting up a poster in school when she hears people murmuring. Her vice president shows her the Dear David blog, which has been leaked, with David's photo on it. Lars knows everyone around her is discussing all the different fantasy stories. Lars rushes to the computer room and locks it from inside. No one knows the identity of the writer yet, so she quickly logs in from the same computer, deletes the account, and clears her browsing history. But Lars still starts panicking and crying. Hannah is clearing things out when Lars arrives and asks for her help. Lars goes straight inside and doesn't talk. At night, Hannah is concerned since Lars hasn't had dinner, and comes to check up on her. Mizanda informs the class that the school has started an investigation to track the source of the pornographic writing related to David. They know the latest story was uploaded from school, and since theirs is the only class with computers on that day, she knows one of them has done it. She asks the culprit to come forward and confess. Everyone automatically thinks Dilla has done it. Lars comes out to watch David play, but her friends show her a video that has been circulating of David's pictures. They all discuss how they forgot to notice how hot David is in front of Arya, and now feel obsessed with him after reading Dear David. They cheer from the stands and call out his name, at a time when David is already feeling uncomfortable. In his nervousness, he misses the goal, and his dad, who is also his coach, asks him to take a lap. David is sitting in the locker room when the boys, including Arya, surround him and start bullying him. David is disgusted by their behavior and asks them to leave. He locks himself in a cubicle and starts panicking. All students are still obsessed with the blog and keep discussing it. When David comes towards his locker, someone reads out an excerpt from the blog where the handmaid spills milk all over his chest. This reminds David of something, and when he notices Lara's walking by, he looks suspicious. At church, the pastor asks if anyone wants to ask for absolution, while David stares knowingly at Lara's. David approaches Lara's separately and asks about her thoughts on who wrote the blog. Lara's denies knowing anything about it, but David knows it's her. He reads out part of the writing where she wished him well before his match, and another incident which clearly points towards Lara's. She asks David to stop, and finally confesses that she wrote the stories. David asks why she didn't just tell him if she had a crush on him. Lara's firmly insists that this is not a crush, and that she just took his name randomly. When David mentions how embarrassed this whole thing is making him, Lara's apologizes and clarifies that she never meant any of this to affect him. Lara's doesn't know who leaked the stories, and begs David to not let anyone know about this, or her life will be over. David feels like after reading the blogs, everyone expects a lot more from him. He confesses that he can't even get the love of his life, Dilla, to talk to him. Lara's asks him to punish her, in exchange for not telling anyone about this. David gets an idea, and since he remembers Lara's used to be Dilla's friend, he asks if she can help him get close to Dilla. Mizinda meets Dilla, and reminds her how close they were to expelling her the last time her pornographic posts were found online. She politely asks Dilla to confess and think about her future, but Dilla stands her ground and firmly insists she had nothing to do with the writing. Mizinda looks at David differently too, and asks if he has any idea about who wrote them, but David seems clueless. Mizinda then questions Lara's, since she has the keys to the computer classroom and could have gotten in any time. Lara's also firmly insists that she leaves the door open during the day, and anyone could have gotten in. Lara's also finds out that David hasn't said anything. Lara's comes over to David's place to give him steamed chicken rice from her mom. Lara's thanks David for not saying anything earlier. David confesses that he was planting a rose for Dilla. Lara's insists that Dilla likes music and photography much more than such gestures, and he needs to take notes, since she is helping him out. David's face lights up when Lara's insists that she can try to get him one proper meeting with Dilla. Lara stands nervously outside Dilla's house with the camera and waits for her to open the door. Dilla takes the camera from her, but shuts the door in Lara's face. Dilla watches an old clip on her camera from when she and Lara's were friends and used to goof around. Hannah has heard about the blog, and feels worried about David and Mr. Deddy. Hannah is curious to read about this writing, but Lara snatches the phone and manages to delete the link. Lara's reads out a note from Mizinda about a sex education seminar that everyone in Kahea High School is expected to attend. Mizinda wants to meet them individually too, and when Jilling doesn't listen, Lara shouts at him, which amuses David. The students walk towards the seminar when Lara's notices Dilla sneaking away. She runs after Dilla and confesses that she misses her. Dilla is ready to believe this only if Lara's helps her sneak out. Lara's is scared, since she has never done this before, but takes Dilla's hand and they rush out of the school happily on her motorcycle. Lara's and Dilla are back to their old nicknames, and Lara's offers her jacket to Dilla as she feels cold. They reach Lara's house, and Hannah is very happy to see Dilla with her again. They take a shower and then talk before sleeping. Dilla recalls the time everyone started calling her a slut in school. She explains that when Arya asked her to be his girlfriend at the gym, she said no, but the entire school started thinking she had sex with him. She wanted to discuss this with Lara's, but she felt very insulted by the whole school. Dilla also feels disappointed that Lara's did not stand up for her. Lara's apologizes to Dilla for not being there for her, and assures her that she doesn't think of her as a slut. The next day, Dilla and Lara's happily drive up to school on her motorcycle as David watches them. Mizinda has punished them to clean the washrooms. Lara's suggests they can study together for math, and slyly informs her that David will come too, since he needs help. Dilla shows Lara's her social media, where people are going crazy over David and posting sensual content. Lara's finds that her classmates have made t-shirts with David's shirtless photos. Lara's feels irritated, and informs the girls they should feel bad about David, because all the sponsors pulled out because of the blog. David is still practicing football at night for the semifinals when Lara's shows up. She asks him to come for a study group with her and Dilla the next day. David feels like it's too soon and he isn't prepared enough. She asks David to imagine that she is Dilla and talk to her to practice. Pretending that Lara's is Dilla, he starts describing that he likes her free personality. David is conscious when he comes up to Dilla's house, and Lara's teases him about being too dressed up. Dilla opens the door and lets them in. While studying, Dilla makes no effort, but Lara's goes all out to teach David how to do a sum. David also seems to be invested, and tries to figure out the solution. Dilla looks at them suspiciously because she feels there is something cooking between them. Lara's then goes to the washroom, and David tries to talk to Dilla about her weekend plans. Dilla clarifies that she did not write Dear David, and David firmly insists he knows. Dilla asks Lars about her plans the next day and wants to hang out with her properly. Lars agrees, but tries to also get David involved by suggesting that they can use his car. Dilla seems suspicious and directly asks Lars if she has a crush on David. Lars denies this and suggests that if Dilla likes him, she should pursue it. David drives, with Dilla on the front seat next to him and Lars at the back. Dilla and Lars end up fighting about the music, and there seems to be some tension. They reach an aquarium, where David starts comparing Lars to a clownfish. Lars also has a comeback, but when Dilla suggests they move somewhere else, David happily agrees. David spends some time with Dilla and snaps pictures with her while they watch the fish. He also calls Lars over for a picture with the three of them. Dilla starts looking around, while David dares Lars to touch a creepy sea creature. Lars is scared, but David forces her hand and makes her touch it. It tickles, and they both end up laughing and having a very good time as Dilla watches them from behind suspiciously. Mizinda calls Dilla to her office and shows her a pornographic comic with Dilla's name on it. She wants Dilla to just admit that she wrote the blog. Dilla tries to explain that anyone could have taken her name. Mizinda suspends her for 10 days and takes away her phone in punishment. Everyone watches as Dilla walks out of the school after her suspension. Lars is collecting everyone's phones while the teachers start examining the length of all the girls' skirts to see if it is proper. David and Lars sit and wonder how the situation got so bad. Dilla's mother suggests that she can just change schools, but Dilla is tired of moving around. Lars is preparing for the Kahea Cup when she gets a call from a frantic Dilla, but chooses to ignore it. Dilla feels lost, but finally gets up to put on lipstick and get ready. The match has started, and Lars sits in the stands to support David. The match is going well, and David scores the winning goal. Everyone is excited, till Dilla walks towards David with confidence and kisses him. She declares he can now be her boyfriend. David is shocked, but all boys pick him up to congratulate him. Lars rushes to the washroom to cry. Mizinda is impressed with Lars's progress and offers her an increase in her scholarship. Hana is at the shop when Lars comes in, looking upset, but reveals the news about her scholarship. Hana is proud and shows her a brochure of an upcoming church retreat, which David is attending to. David and Dilla are alone and start making out. Things get weird when Dilla insists that David should call her dildo. He does that, but feels very uncomfortable. Lars is on the bus for the retreat, with David sitting behind her. He wants to talk to her, but Lars makes an excuse to delay him. They reach the villa, and David excitedly tells Lars about his kiss with Dilla. He wants Lars's advice because he feels like something was not right, and maybe he needs more practice. Lars sarcastically congratulates him, and David can't understand why she's upset. During the prayer meeting, David almost falls asleep, and Lars has to wake him up on time. They participate in a game to find something in the dark forest. David's lamp doesn't work, so Lars offers to let him share hers. David and Lars are alone in the woods, but David is scared about something moving ahead of them. Lars keeps walking, but at one point David falls behind and has to sit down next to a tree as he gets a panic attack. Lars notices that David is missing and starts searching for him. She finds him and notices how badly he is hyperventilating. She tries to call for help and assures him she is coming with someone. David drags her back and holds her hand tightly, asking her to stay there till he calms down. David takes comfort in her presence and asks her to tell him one of her stories to distract him. Lars hesitates initially, but comes up with a new story. She describes a writer working on her new novel in an old cottage by the sea. The writer is experiencing writer's block, so she tries to find some ideas. She notices a soccer player nearby, who is also trying to run away from the city life. She gives David a description of a soccer player with a mustache. As they are the only two people there, they enjoy a peaceful life on the beach. In her story, it is time for their ending soon, when the soccer player has to go home to get married. But the writer gives him a letter that he should open later. The writer is willing to sacrifice her happiness so the soccer player and his fiancée can have a happy life. David feels the writer should get the happiness she deserves too. On their way back from the retreat, David is grateful to Lars and holds her hand. Lars asks about what happened to him the other night and if his panic attacks are frequent. David shares that his mom had them, and she even locked herself away. He remembers how pleasant she was whenever she was happy. His mother once took him to a waterfall, where he got a panic attack for the first time. David thought it was a heart condition, but his medical results always came out clean. David insists his dad can never know about them. Lars shares how her dad left her when she was in 4th grade. She understands David's situation, because she feels like she has always blamed herself for her dad leaving. This is why she wants to be a good student, be successful, and have a lot of money. David teases her about one day having a cottage by the sea. Lars is very happy when she reaches home, and thinks about the beautiful time she had with David on the bus. She gets a message from David asking her about how the story ends. Lars starts writing the ending for David, and explains how the soccer player comes back to the cottage after years and finds the writer missing. He finally decides to read the letter, which starts with, "Dear David." Dilla is pissed with David for trying to break off their relationship, after he chased her for so long. David offers to go out for a bit to let her think. Dilla is very angry and lies on her bed when she hears a message alert on David's phone. When she checks it, she finds a message from Lara's that makes it clear she is the writer and that she is in love with David. Dilla quickly takes a picture of the message. David then walks in, trying to say something, but Dilla asks him if he knew all this time. She wants to know why he didn't speak up, even if she was suspended and bullied in school. David feels bad and confesses that he promised to not reveal anything if Lara's helped him get close to her. Dilla declares that she hates them and kicks David out. When Lara's walks into school the next day, David calls her out with urgency and informs her that Dilla knows. Lara's faces a whole swarm of students who finally know she is the writer and feel surprised that a good girl like her has such a dirty mind. Mizanda makes Lara's read the latest viral news revealing that she is the writer. Lara's is still not willing to confess, and Mizanda threatens to expel her if she doesn't hand over her phone. Dilla seems very happy to get her phone back. Lara's approaches Dilla near her locker and asks why she had to tell everyone. Dilla feels ashamed of ever being friends with Lara's because she just thinks about herself. The students applaud as Lara's runs away in tears. David tries to stop her, but she reveals how stupid she has been and wishes she had never written about David. Hannah takes Lara's to church and realizes how judgmental everyone suddenly is. David comes up to Lara's in church and holds her hand. Lara's knows she might get expelled and discusses this with Hannah. Her mother suggests she can always go to a different school. Lara's wants something much better for them, but Hannah just feels grateful for having Lara's as her daughter. While helping her mother do the dishes at home, Lara's starts crying, and Hannah comes over to comfort her. Lara's calls out to Dilla from outside the house, but Dilla asks her to leave. Lara's still climbs her gate and ends up falling from a great height. Dilla rushes to check on her and brings her home. Lara's has chafed her knee, and Dilla tries to put a painful antiseptic on it. Dilla wants her to leave, but Lara's needs her to drive her home. On the way, Lara's confesses that she has been a very bad friend. Dilla agrees and feels it was stupid of her to set her up with David when she herself had a crush on him. When Dilla asks what she regrets the most, Lara's confesses that she regrets hurting her. Dilla stops the car on the way and reveals that she is used to getting hurt by Lara's a lot. This is when Lara's finds out that Dilla has always been in love with her romantically. Dilla starts crying, but Lara's assures her that she matters the most to her. Mizanda informs Lara's that everyone wants her to be expelled, but she has been fighting for Lara's. In exchange for not expelling her, they need Lara's to issue an apology. Lara's is being allowed to stay in school because of her academic credentials. Mizanda believes Arya leaked the stories, but is not going to ask him to apologize. David storms into the locker room in anger and punches Arya in the face. Arya feels he just did it for fun. David warms up for the football match as his team members watch. Everyone is excited to see him perform well, but David's head is not in the game. As the whistle blows, David stares at the football, but doesn't move. Soon enough, he starts panicking and runs away from the field. David has another panic attack in private, while Mr. Deddy comes to check on him. He notices how bad his condition is, and tries to calm him down. Lara's comes rushing to see him too, but stops when she notices his dad with him. David cries about not wanting to be like his mother, and his dad hugs him. Lara's prepares for her speech on stage, and looks at herself strong and hard in the mirror. She then smiles and is ready to deliver it. Mizanda invites her on stage to deliver an important message. Lara's comes up and starts with the regular salutations that were given to her in the speech by Mizanda. But it's soon clear she is not following the standard format by the school, and starts by apologizing to David for making him feel objectified. Mizanda knows this was not part of the speech, but cannot stop her now. Lara's also apologizes to Dilla for all the troubles her lies caused her. She also sarcastically congratulates Arya for leaking her stories, which were meant to be private. She also claims the school is at fault for only punishing the writer, and not the person who violated her rights. Her speech is so rebellious by this time that everyone is in awe. Lara's lastly apologizes to herself for feeling ashamed of who she is, and feels there is nothing wrong with being a young woman in love. As the crowd cheers, Mizanda calls her down from the stage and informs her that she should not continue in the school anymore. Lara's is unbothered, and politely thanks her before leaving. She happily makes her way out of the school, and finds David near her motorcycle. He insists he loved her speech, and confesses that he also loves her. Before he can say much, Lara's kisses him, and they both happily drive off on her motorcycle. Dilla meets the woman she saw in the aquarium earlier, and asks about how it feels to swim with the fish. She introduces herself as Anya, and they both exchange loving looks. David has decided to seek help with a psychiatrist, and goes for his first session with his dad. Dilla teases Lara by insisting that Hannah should read her writing, which seems amazing. Lara's gets defensive, and absolutely prohibits her mother from reading it. Lara's now writes about her own reality, and how she doesn't need anyone to make her feel happy because she is fine with who she is. She feels at peace for the first time, and is happy. Hannah has found Lara's blogs, and when her worker Wahyu comes to ask a question, she pictures him shirtless. She soon realizes she was living in a fantasy, and tries to remember what she was saying.